The air in the Grand Astoria ballroom was thick with the scent of money and magnolias, a suffocating perfume of success. For Damian Blackwood, it was the smell of his own gilded cage. He stood on the mezzanine, a king surveying a kingdom he no longer wanted, his smile a carefully crafted mask for the press. Then he saw her. Across the crowded floor, a laugh, a sound he hadn't heard in 3 years, but had replayed in his nightmares a million times. It was Elara, but she wasn't the broken girl he'd left behind. She was radiant, poised, and holding the hand of a small child, with his own dark hair and her bright, defiant eyes. In that instant, his billion-dollar empire turned to ash in his mouth. The charity gala, hosted by the Children's Wellness Foundation, was the premier social event of the New York autumn season. For Damian Blackwood, the 32-year-old CEO of Blackwood Industries, it was just another Tuesday, another evening of shaking hands with people who wanted his money, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, and pretending the gaping void in his chest wasn't threatening to swallow him whole. He was the archetypal prodigal son who had made good, having tripled his family's inherited fortune in less than a decade. His face was a regular feature in Forbes and Fortune, his name a synonym for ruthless efficiency and audacious takeovers. He had everything a man could want: a penthouse overlooking Central Park, a fleet of cars that collected dust, and an influence that could make or break political careers. He had it all, and he had nothing. "Mr. Blackwood, a pleasure," gushed a portly man named Howard Finch, whose company Damian had recently acquired in a hostile takeover. Damian offered a tight, professional smile and a firm handshake, his mind already drifting. He scanned the opulent ballroom, a sea of designer gowns and bespoke tuxedos, his eyes glazing over the glitter and glamour. It was a performance, and he was its weary lead actor. And then he saw her. She was standing near the silent auction tables, bathed in the soft glow of a crystal chandelier. For a moment, his brain refused to process the image. It had to be a mirage, a cruel trick of the light and his own whiskey-soaked melancholy. But the mirage turned its head, and a cascade of honey-blonde hair shimmered over her shoulder. She smiled at something the man beside her said, and the smile, that genuine, soul-bearing smile that could light up a room, hit Damian with the force of a physical blow. It was Elara. 3 years. It had been 1,095 days since he had last seen her. He had last seen her, standing in the rain outside their small shared apartment, her face pale with shock and streaked with tears as he delivered the cruelest words of his life. He had walked away, telling himself it was necessary, a clean break for the sake of his future, his legacy. He had convinced himself she was a distraction, a momentary lapse in judgment. He had allowed his father's poisonous whispers to paint her as an opportunist. But the woman across the ballroom was no opportunist. She wore a simple but elegant emerald green dress that clung to her curves in a way that spoke of a newfound confidence. She wasn't wearing the ostentatious jewels that adorned the other women in the room. Her elegance was understated natural. She looked happy, whole. It was a sight that should have brought him relief, but instead it ignited a nauseating cocktail of regret and a possessiveness he had no right to feel. As if sensing his stare, her eyes flickered across the room, and for a breathtaking second, they locked with his. The smile vanished from her lips. Recognition dawned, followed by a flash of something he couldn't decipher: pain, anger, and then a chillingly blank neutrality. She turned away with a finality that was more cutting than any curse. Damian's feet moved before he could think, a magnetic pull drawing him toward the ghost of his past. The crowd parted for him, a subconscious deference to his power. But as he drew closer, he saw what he had missed from the mezzanine. Standing beside Elara, her tiny hand clutching the folds of her mother's dress, was a little girl. She had a cloud of dark, unruly curls, his curls, and when she looked up, her eyes were the same startling shade of green as Elara's. She couldn't be more than 3 years old. The math was brutally simple. The world tilted on its axis, the muffled chatter of the gala fading into a dull roar in his ears. A daughter. He had a daughter. He was 10 feet away when the man with Elara, a handsome, silver-haired man with kind eyes and a doctor's calm demeanor, noticed his approach. He placed a protective hand on Elara's arm. "Elara," the man said softly, "is everything all right?" She didn't look at Damian. She kept her focus on the man, but her posture was rigid. "It's nothing, Nathan, just a ghost." Damian stopped in front of them, his throat dry. "Elara," he managed to say, his voice raspy. She finally turned her head, her expression an icy mask. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" The words were a slap. "Don't do this," he pleaded, his voice low and urgent. "Please, we need to talk." "I don't think we have anything to talk about, Mr. She feigned ignorance, a cruel and brilliant defense. "Blackwood," he supplied, his jaw tight. "Damian Blackwood, you know who I am." "Ah, yes, Blackwood Industries," she said, her tone dripping with polite disinterest. "I've heard of your company." She then turned to her companion. "Nathan, this is Mr. Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood, this is Dr. Nathan Cole." Dr. Cole extended a hand, his grip firm and his gaze steady, analytical. "Mr. Blackwood." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of acknowledgement layered with a warning. Damian ignored the hand. His eyes were fixed on Elara, then flickered down to the little girl who was now hiding behind her mother's leg, peering at him with wide, curious eyes. His eyes! "Who is this?" Damian asked, the question tearing from his soul. Elara's chin lifted. She placed a gentle hand on her daughter's head. "This is my daughter Lily," she said, her voice like steel. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we were just about to leave. It was an experience meeting you, Mr. Blackwood." She turned to go, but Damian took a step, blocking her path. "Elara, stop. She's 3 years old. Your grasp of child development is impressive." She shot back, her voice low and venomous. "She's mine, isn't she?" The words hung in the air between them, heavy and undeniable. Elara laughed, a short, bitter sound, devoid of any humor. "Mine. You have a very selective memory, Damian. You made your choice quite clear. You have your empire. You don't get to have her too." Well, she sidestepped him, her movements sharp and precise. "Come on, sweetie," she said to Lily, her voice instantly softening into maternal warmth. As she walked away, Dr. Cole gave Damian one last look, a mixture of pity and contempt, before following her. Damian stood frozen, the noise of the gala crashing back in on him. He watched her go, a confident, successful woman who was a universe away from the girl he had abandoned. And he realized she hadn't just introduced herself as Elara. She had called herself Elara, but the nameplate on her auction paddle, which she had left on the table, read something different. It was a small, elegant card. Elara Reed, founder Lily's Garden Designs. She had even taken his name from her. He was a stranger, a ghost at her feast. And in that moment, Damian Blackwood, the man who had everything understood, the true meaning of bankruptcy. The drive back to his penthouse was a blur of city lights, smearing across the rain-slicked windows. The silence in the back of the Maybach was absolute, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside Damian's head. He poured himself a glass of scotch, the amber liquid doing nothing to numb the jagged edges of his new reality. Elara Reed, Lily's Garden Designs. The names echoed, each one a hammer blow against the fortress of lies he had constructed around his heart. He sank into a leather armchair that cost more than the first car he and Elara had shared, a beat-up old Ford they had driven on weekend trips out of the city, singing along to the radio, blissfully unaware of the future barreling toward them. The past wasn't just a memory anymore. It was a living, breathing thing that had looked at him with his own eyes. His mind reeled back 4 years to a time before Blackwood Industries consumed him. He met Elara Hayes in his final year at Columbia. He was the business school prodigy, already being groomed to take over the family conglomerate. She was an art history major, a brilliant painter, with a scholarship and a spirit that seemed to burn brighter than anyone he'd ever met. She saw past the Blackwood name. She saw him. She challenged his cynical worldview, laughed at his corporate jargon, and dragged him to dusty museums and hole-in-the-wall jazz clubs. With her, he wasn't Garrett Blackwood's heir, he was just Damian, and he had been terrifyingly, incandescently happy. Their love was a whirlwind romance against the backdrop of New York City. They were inseparable, their futures intertwined. He had bought her a simple silver locket, a stark contrast to the diamonds his father's mistresses wore. She never took it off. He had planned to propose after graduation, to build a life where his world and hers could coexist. Then came the call that changed everything. His father, Garrett Blackwood, had summoned him to the family estate, a cold, monolithic mansion in Connecticut that had always felt more like a mausoleum than a home. Garrett was a titan of industry, a man carved from granite and ambition. He viewed emotion as a liability and love as a transaction. This girl, Garrett had started not bothering with pleasantries, a file folder slapped down on his vast mahogany desk. Elara Hayes, an art student. Parents are a teacher and a librarian in Ohio. No connections, no wealth, no strategic value. She's the woman I love, Dad, Damian had replied, his jaw set. Garrett had laughed a harsh, grating sound. Love is for poets and fools, Damian. We build empires. We don't have time for such sentimental nonsense. He opened the folder. Inside were photographs, grainy pictures of Elara talking to another man, a former boyfriend from her hometown. There were bank statements cleverly doctored to show large, unexplained deposits into her account. She's playing you, Garrett stated, his voice cold as ice. A classic gold digger. She knows exactly who you are. She found out about the trust fund that matures on your 30th birthday. This is an investment for her. She secures the Blackwood heir, and she's set for life. I don't believe you, Damian said, though a seed of doubt planted by a lifetime of his father's cynicism began to sprout. Don't you, Garrett pressed, leaning forward. Think about it. The timing is perfect. She gets her hooks into you right before you take over the European division, before your life becomes infinitely more public and a divorce becomes infinitely more expensive. The poison seeped in, twisting Damian's love into suspicion. He had been raised in a world of prenuptial agreements and strategic alliances. His father's words, though cruel, resonated with the brutal logic he'd been taught his entire life. A week later, Elara told him she was pregnant. She had been nervous but hopeful, her hands trembling, as she showed him the positive test. Damian saw her hopeful smile, but all he could hear was his father's voice. A trap. The ultimate insurance policy. He didn't see the terror and love in her eyes. He saw a calculated move. The timing was too perfect, too damning. The seed of doubt his father planted had grown into a monstrous choking vine. The confrontation was brutal. He returned to their apartment that night, a different man, his heart encased in ice. He accused her of trapping him, of planning the pregnancy to secure her future. He threw his father's fabricated evidence in her face, calling her a liar and a gold digger. He watched the light in her eyes die, watched her vibrant spirit crumble into dust under the weight of his accusations. The baby is a mistake, he'd snarled the words tasting like acid. I want nothing to do with it, or with you. Get rid of it, or don't. I don't care. But my life, the Blackwood life, is not for you. He had left her standing there, shattering not just her heart, but his own. He walked away and straight into his father's prepared future. He took over the European division, threw himself into his work with a religious fervor, and used success as an anesthetic. He told himself he had dodged a bullet, that he had made the hard but necessary choice. For 3 years, that lie was the foundation of his existence. Now sitting in his silent penthouse, the foundation had turned to sand. The confident, serene woman at the gala was not a gold digger. The protective, kind-eyed doctor by her side was not a mark. And the little girl, with his hair and her mother's eyes, was not a mistake. She was his daughter. He pulled up the website for Lily's Garden Designs on his tablet. It was a beautiful, whimsical site filled with handcrafted wooden toys, custom-painted murals, and bespoke children's furniture. It was imbued with Elara's artistic soul, her love for beauty and creation. The About Us page featured a photo of her, not the gala photo, but a candid shot of her in a paint-splattered workshop, smiling with Lily on her hip. The text was simple, founded by Elara Reed, a mother who believed that a child's world should be filled with magic and art. Lily's garden was born from a desire to create beautiful, sustainable, and imaginative pieces for the little people who matter most. Every item is made with love, from our garden to yours. There was no mention of a father, no hint of a past life. She had built this herself from the ashes of the life he had burned down. She hadn't needed his money. She had created her own success on her own terms. The lie he had lived for 3 years wasn't just a lie, it was a blasphemy. He hadn't just misjudged her, he had desecrated the purest thing he had ever known. And his father, Garrett Blackwood, was the architect of it all. A cold, hard fury began to replace the regret. It was a familiar feeling, the same ruthless anger he channeled in the boardroom. But this time, the target wasn't a rival corporation. It was his own father. He picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over Garrett's contact number. The bill for his father's manipulation had just come due, and Damian Blackwood always paid his debts. The morning after the gala, Elara Reed woke up before the sun, the same way she had every morning for the past 3 years. The quiet hours before Lily woke were her sanctuary, the time she used to sketch, plan, and build the life that Damian Blackwood had tried to destroy. But this morning, there was no peace. His face, etched with a shock that mirrored her own, was burned into her mind. She padded into her workshop, a converted sunroom in her modest but charming house in a quiet suburb just outside the city. The scent of cut pine and oil paints usually calmed her, but today it did nothing to soothe the tremor in her hands. She ran a hand over a half-finished wooden rocking horse, its gentle curves a testament to her patience and craft. This workshop, this business, this life, she had built it all with these 2 hands. The aftermath of Damian's departure had been a freefall into darkness. She was 23, pregnant, and utterly alone in the most expensive city in the world. His cruel words had been more than just a rejection. They were a systematic demolition of her self-worth. For weeks, she was a ghost, barely eating the grief, a physical weight pinning her to the bed in their now empty apartment. The eviction notice was the slap that finally woke her up. Her salvation came in the form of a small dusty box left to her by her grandmother. Inside was not a fortune, but a modest inheritance. $20,000 and a collection of her grandfather's woodworking tools. Her grandmother's letter was simple. For a rainy day or a new beginning, make something beautiful, my Ellie. It was a lifeline. She paid off the immediate debts, packed a single suitcase, and fled New York City. She didn't have a destination, just a desperate need to escape the ghosts of every street corner she and Damian had walked. She landed in a smaller, quieter city, a few hours away, a place where no one knew the Blackwood name. She rented a small apartment, found a part-time waitressing job, and legally changed her surname to Reed, her grandmother's maiden name. Elara Hayes was dead. Elara Reed was a survivor. The pregnancy was difficult and lonely, but it was also her anchor. Every kick, every flutter was a reminder that she wasn't truly alone. This tiny unborn person depended on her entirely. For her baby, she had to be more than a survivor. She had to be a fortress. When Lily was born with a shock of dark curly hair and her own green eyes, Elara felt a love so fierce it eclipsed all the pain that had come before. Holding her daughter, she made a promise. Lily would have a life filled with love, security, and beauty. She would never know the cold transactional world of men like Damian and Garrett Blackwood. That's when Lily's garden began. Strapped for cash, she couldn't afford the plastic mass-produced toys that filled the stores. So she picked up her grandfather's tools. She started small carving simple wooden animals for Lily. She painted them in bright, non-toxic colors. Friends from her prenatal group admired them, and soon they were asking to buy them. She started an Etsy shop. The first sale felt like winning the lottery. From toys, she expanded. She painted a mural on Lily's nursery wall, a whimsical forest scene. Another mum saw it and commissioned one for her own child. The business grew organically through word of mouth, and the undeniable quality and heart she poured into every piece. Within 2 years, she had outgrown the Etsy shop and launched her own website. She hired her first employee, a local carpenter named George, and then a young marketing graduate to handle social media. Lily's Garden Designs was no longer a hobby. It was a thriving small business. Dr. Nathan Cole entered their lives when Lily was 6 months old and spiked a terrifyingly high fever. Elara had rushed her to the pediatric clinic in a panic. Nathan was the doctor, on call, a man whose calmness was a balm to her frayed nerves. He was kind, patient, and spoke to her, not as a hysterical young mother, but as a partner in her child's care. He became Lily's regular pediatrician, and over time, a friend. He was a widower, his wife having lost a battle with cancer years ago, and he understood loss. He admired Elara's strength and fierce devotion to her daughter. He would sometimes join them at the park, or they'd grab an early dinner at a family-friendly restaurant. He became a stable, positive male figure in Lily's life, a surrogate uncle she adored. Their relationship was one of deep, platonic affection and mutual respect. Nathan never pushed for more understanding, that Elara's heart was a fortress. She wasn't ready to surrender. He was content to be her friend, her confidant, and Lily's Dr. Nate. It was Nathan who had encouraged her to buy a table at the Children's Wellness Foundation gala. Lily's Garden was now successful enough to be a corporate sponsor. "You've built something incredible, Elara," he'd said. "You deserve to be in that room. Not as someone's guest, but as a creator, a donor. Be proud of it." She had been proud. Walking into that ballroom with Nathan on her arm, and Lily, who was to be honored as a miracle child who had overcome early health scares, by her side, she had felt a sense of arrival. She had faced the worst and built a paradise from the rubble. Then she saw Damian, and for a terrifying moment, the fortress walls crumbled. The sight of him brought it all back, the dizzying love, the crushing betrayal, the echoing cruelty of his final words. But seeing him look at Lily, that was different. That was not grief. That was primal fear. He was a threat, a predator circling her carefully tended garden. Her cold dismissal of him at the gala had been pure instinct, a mother bear protecting her cub. But now, in the quiet of her workshop, the complexity of the situation settled in. He knew. There was no doubt in his eyes. And Damian Blackwood was not a man who let things go. He was a man who conquered, who acquired, who took what he believed was his. A knock on the workshop door made her jump. It was Nathan holding 2 cups of coffee. He'd stayed the night on the couch, sensing she wouldn't want to be alone. "Thought you could use this," he said, his expression gentle. "You didn't sleep, did you?" She shook her head, accepting the warm mug. How can he just reappear? After all this time, what does he want? Nate. "What men like that always want," Nathan said, leaning against the workbench. "Whatever they don't have. For 3 years, he had his empire, and you were a problem he thought he'd solved. Now he sees you happy and successful, and he sees a beautiful little girl who looks just like him. You're no longer a problem to be discarded. You're an asset he failed to acquire." The cold, clinical assessment was terrifyingly accurate. "I won't let him near her." Elara whispered, her voice trembling with a fury she hadn't felt in years. He doesn't deserve her. He gave up that right when he called her a mistake. I know, Nathan said softly, and I'll stand right beside you. But Elara, you need to be smart about this. He's not the broke college student you knew. He's one of the most powerful men in the country. He has resources we can't imagine. A straight-up fight could get ugly and public. She looked around her workshop at the vibrant, joyful world she had created. This is my world, Nate. This is Lily's world. I built these walls high for a reason. I know, he repeated, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. And we'll make sure they're strong enough to withstand any storm. But as she looked out the window at the rising sun, Elara knew this was no ordinary storm. This was a hurricane named Damian Blackwood, and he was heading directly for them. The architect of her new life would now have to become its staunchest defender. The fury that had solidified in Damian's penthouse propelled him into action. For the first time in years, the ruthless machinery of his mind was not focused on a stock price or a corporate acquisition, but on a personal crusade. His first move was to deploy his most trusted private investigator, a former MI6 agent named Finch, who typically handled sensitive corporate espionage. I want to know everything about Elara Reed and Lily's garden designs, Damian instructed over an encrypted line. Her address, her financials, the real ones, not just public records, her associates, her friends. I want to know who this Dr. Nathan Cole is to her. I want a complete picture. And Finch, he added, his voice dropping, be invisible. She cannot know she's being watched. This is not about intimidation, it's about information. Within 48 hours, the report landed on his desk. It was a testament to Elara's resilience. The story it told was one of hardship, tenacity, and incredible success, built from scratch. It detailed her name, change the move. The small apartment, the waitressing job, the birth of her daughter, and the slow, steady rise of her business. Finch's report confirmed that her company was entirely self-funded and profitable. There were no hidden backers, no secret trust funds. She had done it all herself. The report also detailed her relationship with Dr. Nathan Cole. He was highly respected, a dedicated pediatrician and community figure. By all accounts, their relationship was close, but platonic. A deep friendship forged in the crucible of her early struggles as a single mother. He was Lily's doctor and her mother's rock. The jealousy that had flared in Damian at the gala cooled into a grudging respect. This man had been there when he should have been. Armed with the truth of Elara's journey, Damian turned his focus to the source of the original lie. He flew to the Blackwood estate in Connecticut, storming into his father's study unannounced. Garrett Blackwood sat behind his desk, a monolith of power, looking more like a king holding court than a father. Damian, an unexpected visit. I trust this isn't about your quarterly projections. I've already read them. Satisfactory, but lacking aggression. I saw her, Damian said, his voice dangerously calm as he stood before the desk. Garrett didn't feign ignorance. The artist. I heard she was at the gala. Climbing the social ladder, it seems. I told you she was ambitious. She was there as a donor, Dad, a successful business owner, and she wasn't alone. Damian leaned forward, placing his hands on the polished mahogany. She has a daughter, a 3-year-old daughter with my eyes. You lied to me. Garrett waved a dismissive hand. I protected the family. I gave you information. You made a choice. It was the correct one. That girl and her bastard child would have been an anchor around your neck. Her name is Lily, Damian snarled, his control snapping, and the information you gave me was a fabrication. Those bank statements were faked. The man in those photos was her cousin, who you paid to play along. I had Finch trace the transactions. They lead back to a shell corporation you control. A flicker of surprise crossed Garrett's face, quickly, masked by his usual arrogance. Thorough. You've inherited some of my cunning, at least. Yes, I embellished the truth to make you see reason, a necessary evil to secure our legacy. And it worked. Look at what you've become. What have I become? Damian laughed a hollow, bitter sound. I've become you, and I have a daughter I've never met because I trusted you, because I was weak enough and scared enough to believe your poison. Do not speak to me of weakness, Garrett thundered, rising from his chair. I built this empire from nothing. I made sacrifices you can't even comprehend. This family, this name is all that matters. A woman and a child are fleeting. A legacy is forever. You sacrificed your son's soul for a balance sheet, Damian retorted, his voice dropping to a whisper. And for that, I will never forgive you. He turned and walked away. You walk out that door, you are no longer my son. Garrett bellowed at his back. I haven't been your son for years, Damian said without turning around. I've just been your best performing asset. The war with his father was just the beginning. News travels fast in their rarefied world. Whispers of a rift between the Blackwood men reached the ears of Damian's chief rival, a notoriously predatory corporate raider named Caleb Thorne. Thorne had been looking for a crack in the Blackwood armor for years. A family feud was interesting. A secret love child was ammunition. Thorne hired his own, less scrupulous investigators. They were not invisible, like Finch. A black sedan began parking across the street from Elara's house. A photographer with a long-lens camera was spotted near the park where she took Lily to play. Elara felt it immediately, the unnerving sensation of being watched. Her sanctuary was being invaded. Panicked, she called Damian. It was the last thing she wanted to do, but Nathan had been right. This was a world she didn't understand. She found his private number through the gala's donor list, her hand shaking as she dialed. He answered on the first ring. Elara. They're watching me, she said, her voice tight with fear. There are men cars. They're taking pictures of Lily. Damian's blood ran cold. It wasn't him, which meant it was someone else. Thorne. Where are you? At the park. I'm leaving now. Stay there. I'm on my way. He ended the call, his mind racing. He arrived at the park in under 30 minutes, his driver pushing the limits of the law. He saw her huddled on a bench with Lily, with Nathan standing guard, his arm protectively around Elara's shoulders. The idyllic family scene he had interrupted before, but this time it was tainted by the sinister glint of a camera lens from across the street. He approached them, his face grim. It's not me, Elara. I swear it. Then who is it? She demanded, her fear making her sharp. My rival, Caleb Thorne. He must have heard about everything. He's trying to get leverage to create a scandal that will damage my company. He looked at her, his expression filled with a despair she had never seen on him before. My world is bleeding into yours. I'm so sorry. He then did the only thing he knew how to do. He tried to solve the problem with money. I can fix this. I'll move you. A new house, top-of-the-line security. I'll give you anything you need, anything Lily needs. I'll set up a trust fund so vast she'll never want for anything. It was the worst possible thing he could have said. Elara stood up, her eyes blazing with a righteous fire. A trust fund. Do you hear yourself? You think you can throw money at her and fix this? You think you can buy your way back into a life you threw in the trash? She is not a line item on your balance sheet. Damian, she is my daughter. She is a person you abandoned. You don't get to fix this. You are the thing that's broken. She picked up Lily, who started to cry, unsettled by the tension. Stay away from us, Elara said, her voice a deadly whisper. You and your toxic world. Stay away before you destroy the only good thing either of us ever created. She walked away, leaving Damian standing there with Nathan, who looked at him, not with anger, but with a profound sadness. She built that life to be free of men like you, Nathan said quietly. And now you've led them right to her door. Damian watched her go, the truth of her words crashing over him. He couldn't buy his way out of this. He couldn't fight his way out. Every move he made, every attempt to get closer, only put her in more danger. He had to find a different way, a way that wasn't about winning, but about protecting, even if it meant losing her and Lily for good. The image of Elara's terrified, furious face was seared into Damian's mind. Her words echoed a brutal and honest indictment. You are the thing that's broken. He had spent his life breaking things, companies' contracts, people for profit and power. Now, his very presence was threatening to break the one person he was desperate to protect. The situation with Caleb Thorne was escalating. A sleazy online tabloid known for its connections to corporate assassins like Thorne published a thinly veiled article titled, "Which New York Titan is Hiding a Secret Heir?" It didn't name names, but the clues pointed directly at Damian. It was a warning shot, a promise of the PR nightmare to come. Thorne was going to expose Lily to the world painting Elara as a home wrecker and his daughter as a dirty secret, all to tank Blackwood Industries' stock before a takeover bid. Damian realized he had been playing the wrong game. He had been trying to get back into Elara's life to reclaim a past he had forfeited. But that was a selfish goal. The only goal that mattered now was shielding her and Lily from the fallout of his world. He had to get in front of the storm, not for his sake, but for theirs. His first call was not to his lawyers or his PR team, but to a respected journalist at the Wall Street Journal, a woman named Patricia Vance, known for her integrity. He offered her an exclusive. He controlled the narrative himself. He didn't reveal Lily's identity or location, but he admitted to making a grave personal mistake in his past, acknowledging a profound and deeply regretted estrangement. He framed it as a story of personal growth and accountability, spinning Thorne's weapon into a shield. It was a huge risk, exposing a vulnerability he had always kept hidden, but it was better than the salacious garbage the tabloids would print. Next, he dealt with Caleb Thorne. Damian spent 2 days sleepless and fueled by coffee and a cold rage, digging into every corner of Thorne's life and business. He used Finch and his entire corporate intelligence division. He found it a series of illegal offshore accounts used for bribery and market manipulation. It was corporate dynamite. He arranged a meeting. Not in a boardroom, but on neutral ground, a private room at a quiet old-world club. Thorne arrived smug and triumphant. "Blackwood, to what do I owe the pleasure? Come to negotiate the terms of your surrender." Damian didn't waste time with pleasantries. He slid a single data stick across the table. That contains transaction records from 3 separate accounts in the Cayman Islands. It details bribes paid to officials in 2 different countries to secure mineral rights. The SEC would be very interested. So would the Department of Justice. Thorne's smirk vanished. His face went pale. "What do you want?" "You will call off your dogs," Damian said, his voice level and deadly. "The journalists, the photographers. You will erase every photo, every piece of information you have on Elara Reed and her daughter. You will never speak their names again. You will drop your bid for my company. You will walk away." "You're asking me to commit corporate suicide," Thorne hissed. "I'm offering you a choice," Damian countered. "Walk away from my company, or I will personally walk this data stick into the US Attorney's office. And believe me, after the story I just gave the Journal, a story about taking accountability for my past, the public will see me as a repentant man, cleaning up a corrupt world, starting with you. You, on the other hand, will go to prison for a very long time." Thorne stared at him, his mind calculating the odds. He was trapped. Damian had him cold. "You have my word." Thorne finally ground out the words, tasting like poison. "I don't trust your word," Damian said, standing up. "My people will be monitoring you. Any deviation, and the world burns down around you." He had won. He had protected them. But the cost was immense. The story in the journal would cause a dip in his stock and questions from his board. Letting Thorne off the hook for his crimes felt wrong, but it was the only way to guarantee Elara's privacy. He had used the corrupt tools of his world to protect the purity of hers. But it wasn't enough. He had stopped the external threat, but he was still the original source of the problem. He had to give Elara the one thing she truly wanted: control. He called Nathan Cole. "Dr. Cole," he began, "I need to ask for your help. I need to arrange a meeting with Elara, both of you. I'm not going to ask for anything. I'm going to give." Nathan was hesitant, but Damian's tone was different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a weary gravity. He agreed. They met in Nathan's office at the clinic after hours. It was sterile, safe territory. Elara sat with her arms crossed, her expression guarded. Nathan stood beside her, a quiet pillar of support. Damian didn't sit down. He stood before them like a defendant before his judges. "Elara," he began, "I'm not here to apologize. Words are meaningless after what I did. I'm here to take action. I know about Thorne. I've dealt with him. He won't bother you again. I've also taken steps to control the story, to protect your privacy above all else." He laid out what he had done, not to brag, but to inform. He told her about the journalist, the confrontation with Thorne, the leverage he used. Then he placed a thick legal binder on the desk. "This is not a check," he said, looking her directly in the eye. "This is for Lily. It's a trust fund. It's ironclad and managed by an independent third party. I am listed only as the benefactor. I have zero access to it and zero control over it. It's not a payment. It's what a father owes his daughter for her education, her health, her future, all the things I failed to provide." He then slid a second set of documents across the desk. "This," he said, his voice cracking slightly, "is a legal relinquishment of my parental rights. It's signed and dated. All it needs is your signature and a judge's stamp. It gives you sole, undisputed custody. It erases me from her life legally and permanently. It gives you the power to decide if I will ever be anything more to her than a biological footnote." He looked at her, his soul stripped bare. "You were right. I am the thing that's broken, and I won't let my broken pieces cut you or her ever again. The choice is yours. All of it. I'm giving you back the control I took from you 3 years ago." He turned and walked out of the office, leaving the documents and his entire future as a father in her hands. He didn't look back. It was the hardest thing he had ever done, and the first thing in years that felt truly right. He had made a stand not for his empire, but for his daughter, and it was a stand that required him to walk away. Silence descended upon Nathan's office, thick and heavy. Elara stared at the 2 legal binders on the desk, as if they were live grenades. The first represented security, a future for her daughter, free from financial worry. The second represented freedom, a legal severing of the tie that had caused her so much pain. It was everything she should have wanted. It was a total victory. So why did it feel so much like loss? Nathan picked up the document, relinquishing Damian's rights. His brow furrowed as he scanned the legal jargon. "He's not bluffing," he said, his voice full of a surprise he couldn't hide. "This is as real as it gets. He's effectively handing you a loaded gun and telling you to pull the trigger." Elara sank into a chair, her hands trembling. "I don't understand. The man I knew, the man who left me, he would never give up control. He would never surrender." "Maybe he's not that man anymore," Nathan suggested, gently sitting in the chair opposite her. "Elara, what he did to you was unforgivable. But what he just did here, threatening his rival, risking his company's reputation, and then handing you complete power over the one thing he seems to want most in the world. That was the act of a father protecting his child, not a billionaire protecting his assets." She looked at Nathan, her eyes swimming with unshed tears. "What do I do, Nate? For 3 years, all I've wanted was for him to disappear. Now he's offering me a way to make that happen forever, and I'm hesitating. Because it's not just about you anymore. Nathan said wisely. It's about Lily. Does she deserve a life completely free of the chaos of the Blackwood? Name absolutely. But does she also one day deserve the chance to know where her dark, curly hair comes from? To know the man who, for all his catastrophic faults, seems to be desperately trying to do the right thing? Now? That's a question only you can answer, and you don't have to answer it tonight. Hoyer. Weeks passed. The story in the Wall Street Journal caused a stir, but Damian's candor and the subsequent quiet from Caleb Thorne allowed the news cycle to move on. Blackwood Industries' stock dipped, then stabilized. Damian weathered the storm, with his board, his newfound humility, a startling change that surprisingly earned him a measure of respect from some of the older, wiser members. He finalized the estrangement from his father, a quiet but complete severing. He was for the first time in his life utterly alone. He sold the ostentatious penthouse and moved into a smaller, more private apartment. He worked, but the fire for conquest was gone, replaced by a dull, persistent ache of absence. He didn't contact Elara. He respected the silence, giving her the space she needed. The ball was in her court, and he had resigned himself to the fact that she would likely never return it. One crisp autumn afternoon, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He answered, his heart leaping into his throat. Hello. Damian. Elara's voice said, calm and steady. It's Elara. He could barely breathe. Elara, is everything okay? Yes, everything's fine. There was a pause. I haven't signed the papers. Damian closed his eyes, a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled his knees. I won't sign them, she continued. It wouldn't be right. Not for me, and not for Lily. A child's story shouldn't begin with a legal document that erases half of her. What does that mean? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. It means I'm not offering you forgiveness, Damian, and I'm not offering you a second chance. The trust between us is broken, and it may never be repaired. But Lily is innocent in all of this, and she deserves to know her father, if you're willing to do it on my terms. Any terms, he said immediately, desperately. Anything. Slowly, she said, her voice firm. Very slowly. We start at the beginning. You can meet her. Not as a stranger who shows up and frightens her, but as someone new in her life. Nathan has offered to be there, at the park, this Saturday. You will be Damian. Just Damian. You will not bring gifts. You will not make promises. You will just be present. Can you do that? Yes, he said the word thick with emotion. Yes, I can do that. That Saturday, the park was bathed in golden afternoon light. Damian saw them from a distance. Lily was on the swings, her laughter carrying on the breeze. Nathan was pushing her, and Elara was watching from a bench, a thermos of hot chocolate beside her. Damian approached, his hands clammy, his heart hammering against his ribs. He was more terrified now than he had been facing down Caleb Thorne, or his own father. Nathan saw him first and gave him a small encouraging nod. He slowed the swing and knelt down to speak to Lily. Hey, sweet pea. Remember I told you Mommy's friend Damian was going to come play at the park today? Well, there he is. Lily stopped swinging and looked over at him, her green eyes wide and curious. Damian stopped a few feet away, kneeling down so he was on her level. He offered a small, hesitant smile. Hi, Lily, he said, his voice soft. I'm Damian. It's very nice to meet you. Lily didn't answer. She simply stared at him, taking him in. Then a tiny smile touched her lips. She pointed a small finger at him. You have curly hair, she said, stating a simple fact. Like me. Tears pricked at Damian's eyes. He swallowed hard and nodded. Yeah, he managed to say. I do. Elara watched from the bench, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. This was not an ending. It was not forgiveness. It was not a happily ever after. It was simply a beginning. The first tentative step on a long, uncertain road. a road that might one day lead to redemption, but for now was simply about a father learning to be present, and a mother learning to trust again, one painful, hopeful step at a time. That was the story of Damian and Elara, a story about how the deepest betrayals can sometimes lead to the most profound transformations. It's a reminder that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in accountability, sacrifice, and the courage to rebuild what was broken. Damian lost an empire of arrogance, but gained a chance at a kingdom of love. Their journey is far from over, and the path to forgiveness is long. What do you think Elara should do next? Can a man like Damian truly change, or are some wounds too deep to ever fully heal? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a like, share it with someone who loves a powerful drama, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Thank you for watching.